Welcome into Locked On Knicks. We're prepping for the draft with our good buddy Prez. We're talking Knicks strategy. We're talking the dudes from Duke in the draft. And we're talking about who Prez maybe thinks would be worth trading up for and giving up assets for to move up for in this draft. Right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode, because we are still here for you guys, even during the offseason, 5 days a week. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrict.land. And he is Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And we're joined today by your favorite draft analyst. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. I love Prez, though. He writes for the Strickland, which you may have heard of, and he does really great work every single year. He writes one of the funniest columns that you'll ever see every single year, called the Disrespectful Draft Comps column, where he just picks out like 25 to 30 dudes and writes 3 hilarious comparisons for them. That's coming up next week. But as of right now, he's got a bunch of draft profiles out on the Strickland, and we were lucky enough to get him on here to talk them through and give us the audio versions of all the great things that he's written down over the last few weeks. So without any further ado, let's get right into Draft Talk with Prez. All right, as promised, we are joined by our very special draft guest, because Gavin and I, we've been trying to do the crash course on the draft, but man, this is a tough draft class that required a lot of work. Luckily, our guest has done that legwork for us, so we could just sit back and listen and learn. And our guest, of course, is Prez. You might know him as @_Presidente on Twitter with a Z, or you might know him from the Strickland, or both, where he's been putting out really great draft profiles on the Strickland. A little different from past years. They've been articles just chock full of prospects to look through this year rather than individual draft profiles, as well as the Draft Strickland podcast on the Strickland. He's also the co-host of the Friday Pod Strickland with the Strickland. So Prez does a lot of stuff. Prez, how you doing? And how's this draft cycle treating you?
I'm good. I feel like most of my work is done. I got a couple of small things to continue to investigate. But aside from that, my pencil is almost down here. I don't think I'm making many more changes to big boards or profiles or anything like that. So now I just get to do what all of y'all do, which is sit back and wait for the madness to unfold.
So before we really dive into it, do you feel more fulfilled with this year's work, considering it seems like for the first time in 3 drafts, or two, 3 drafts, however you want to score it, the Knicks might actually make a worthwhile draft selection this year? Does that feel very good to you?
I mean, maybe, sure. I don't want to get my hopes up prematurely. I do this for the journey, Alex, not the destination. Personally, that's the approach I've taken over the last few years.
It's just more fun, you know. It's fun. It's fun when they trade all the picks every year. It doesn't rip your soul out at all, not in the slightest.
No.
But it's a good place to start, though, I guess, because you know the Knicks have 3 draft picks. It seems, I don't know. On one hand, I feel like it would be uncharacteristic of them to make 3 draft picks. On the other hand, I feel like it would be like good, and possibly they would look at it as savvy to make 3 draft picks this year. It seems like a lot of the smoke is saying like they'll probably trade one of them and hopefully make 2 selections. But if you were Leon Rose and Walt Perrin and Brock Aller and the Knicks Brain Trust, what would your sort of overriding philosophy be going into this draft? Like, what do you think what would you do? Would you be looking to consolidate the draft assets into more draft assets? Would you be trying to swing a draft night trade using these picks? Like, what if you were in their shoes, what would kind of be your approach going into this draft?
Well, I'm going to start off with the sexiest of topics, cap mechanics. I think the draft, like every other portion of team building, is in service of the bigger goal of acquiring talent to win a championship. And while the draft is important and most important to me, it is not as important as getting superstars in the building in some point in the next 3 years. So for that reason, as much as I would love to just have the Knicks take 3 swings, or even 4, like they did when they drafted Deuce, uh, Grimes, Rokas, and Sims in one draft. That's really not reasonable with just the way the salaries are set up and with presumable paychecks for OG Anunoby and Isaiah Hartenstein coming down the pipe. So, I'm definitely not a cap guru or anything close to that, but I'm pretty sure that if they had to make 3 picks, that would squeeze them a little bit too high if we expect OG to get a lot of money. And it would kind of tie their hands a little bit with some stuff they would want to do in the next year or two, potentially with trading for a star. So I think 2 is probably the sweet spot. I think definitely at least 1, just because our bench is really strong, but injuries happen, as we all saw, more than any team in the playoffs. And on top of that, if you're trading for a star sometime in the next 2 years, that's probably going to be multiple Knicks salaries going out and one guy coming in. So you might want some depth either to include as one of those salaries or to stick around as someone who could play basketball with the new superstar who is presumably joining Jalen Brunson and whoever's left, right? So at least 1 and maybe 2. If it was me personally, the way I would approach it is I would try to get 1 pick I would try to get the 2 best players possible, but another factor in the back of my head would be trying to get 1 player who could contribute and not make a fool of himself in the short term, right? It doesn't got to be anything crazy, but just don't be a tire fire on one end and be solid on another. And then another player who is probably a little bit more of a home run swing and, maybe is a different archetype that we're missing or has upside for a particular reason. And it doesn't necessarily mean that player has to be ranked higher than the first player, or it could be either way. The flyer guy could be in the second round. The flyer guy could be trading up for somebody who you think has sky high upside, at the 17th pick or something like that. Like there's different ways that could go, but that's how I would approach it.
All right. So I guess, well, first, let me say that that's something we've touched on a lot. I mean, the fact that as of today, this might be the deepest team in basketball. And to your point, we've seen that can deteriorate shockingly quickly if you have uniquely borderline historically bad injury luck. But like the Knicks depth now is not the Knicks depth forever. And it's hopefully something to your point they're thinking about going into this draft. But I guess I want you to get a little bit more specific and tell us like what your best case scenario looks like. And that could be a specific player. It could be a couple of players, but does that involve trading up? Does that involve someone like specific falling to 24? Because I know you have your guys each year that you fall in love with. And there sometimes is this beautiful overlap between who the Prez guy is and also like who ideally the Knicks would actually end up with. So I'm wondering if that like beautiful like coalition has kind of happened this year.
So for me, there's 2 best case scenarios that are a little different. One is just the Knicks are able to reasonably trade up into the teens. I don't think they can realistically get into like the top 10 or 11 or even 12 without giving up something that is important to keep for a superstar trade, right? Like a legit first in the future, not some like garbage first or zillion protections or whatever. So the first scenario is somebody who should be, to me, in that top 10 falls into the early teens. and then the Knicks go and get that guy. So I'm just gonna throw some names out there. Some guys who have been mocked out of the top 10, but to me are firmly in the top 10 or right in the top or right near the top 10 are Ron Holland from the G League Ignite, Rob Dillingham from Kentucky, Isaiah Collier from Southern California, Kyle Filipowski from Duke, Tyler Smith from the G League Ignite, and Devin Carter. Although it sounds like he's Devin Carter from Providence sounds increasingly like he's going in the top 10 picks now or 12 picks. So maybe not him, but there's been for the most part, those guys, well, Collier and Flip are usually in like the 20s, and Holland and Dillingham and Devin Carter are usually in like the 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 range. So just from a talent perspective, getting any of those guys who has that kind of pedigree to me, which is really the reason I have them ranked so high, that would be an automatic like home run for me, just in terms of talent. Like at some point, like you got to figure out fit in terms of development, right? Like, for example, say the Knicks think of best players at center, but they want to bring back Hartenstein and Mitch. If the center is so monumentally talented, you still get that guy and then assume eventually one of your other centers are going out, right? So that's kind of how I would approach it. So that's like really good scenario number one. Really good scenario number two is just we pick closer to when we figure we're going to pick, right? Like maybe you trade up a little bit from like, I don't know, maybe 24 and 38 gets you to like 20 or 19 or 18 or something like that. 22, I don't know. Maybe you trade 24 and 25 and that gets you to 16 to Philly or something like that. If you do that, get somebody who Prez really loves and then keep one other pick, whether it's late first or early second round pick, and get another guy who I think is a first round prospect, which is really possible in this year just because this is just a weird flat draft after like the top 10. So there will be a high probability that there's guys who I think are like top 20 players drafted at like 40 or something like that. So like if they trade up for some guy who is harder to get without trading up, and then they go get another second guy who I like, that is another home run to me. So those are the two best scenarios.
All right, we'll be right back in with Prez to talk through some draft strategy, including guys or a guy that he maybe would consider worth trading up for. So that was a pretty interesting conversation. Spoiler alert, I tried to trap him with a devious trap to get him to trade Deuce McBride. He may or may not have taken the bait. So we'll see in just a second. But first, I got to remind you all, today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available for U.S. customers. I'm kind of curious, while we're talking about the possibility of trade ups, the one guy that you mentioned that heartbreakingly seems like the most tailor-made Knicks player, although people are probably looking at him and saying, I mean, the reason he looks like a tailor-made Knicks player is just because he plays really hard and he kind of does a little bit of everything well. It's very Josh Hardian of him. But Devin Carter, for example, let's just say that it seems like indications are he's going to go top 10 or whatever. Where do you stand this year on, just the power of picks might not be enough to get you there. But let's say that a certain team looks at what like Deuce McBride did, for example, and says, hey, I really like what he did in the playoffs. He was making threes in the playoffs. I mean, I think that he is on the rise enough that I'm like, he's going to be like the next like Pat Beverly type dude, that you could throw out there, is going to play phenomenal defense in the playoffs, hit threes for you, be a game changer. So I'd be willing, if the Knicks are willing to do like, the 24th, let's say, like, I don't know, in theory, it would be like 24th, 38th, and Deuce McBride to move up to like pick 9 or something like that, to go snatch Devin Carter. Is there anybody, it could be Carter, it could be someone else, but is there anybody in this draft that you're looking at and saying like, this guy might be good enough to actually include one of these good depth pieces on the Knicks that they already have to go up and get? Because I think that there's a chance that he could be good enough this year to make them a better team than they would be with said player that's already on the team.
The only player I would do that for is maybe Ron Holland, and I'm not even 100% sure of that. And he's not even a guy who necessarily would be super duper helpful this year. He's 19. He has immense gifts, but he's still a ways from reaching his potential. Not that he can't do stuff right now. He definitely can, but like, because he's 19, it's just 19-year-olds are going to take longer to help unless they're like super duper awesome prospects, like really talented, like top pick guys. And Ron is really good, but he's not like, Anthony Edwards or LaMelo Ball or Markelle Fultz or Scoot or Chet or Cade or Ayton or Paolo or whoever he's not he's not on that kind of level, at least to me. So he'd be the only one. I wouldn't do it. I definitely wouldn't do it for Devin Carter. Like, Devin Carter's a year and a half younger than Deuce. So like, their age gap is not that much. And if you put Deuce from last year and like back at West Virginia, he'd put up he put up like a 10 plus BPM as a 20-year-old. Like, what's he going to do as a 23-year-old, right? Like, he'd be like the best player in the country or something like that. And Carter was one of the best players in the country. Like, don't get it twisted, but like, I'm not, I had Deuce 9th in a much better draft class than this. And that might've been a little wild in retrospect, but he low key is
really good.
Yeah, he's really good. And he's sort of I don't know if he's worth 9th in that class, but if he comes, like, he was scoring in the paint in the playoffs. So like, if he does that and even displays like a little bit of point guard skill next year, then like, actually I will have miraculously somehow been correct. So it would take a lot. And then the other reason you wouldn't do that is because, like, as amazing as Deuce is, if he's amazing, right, that's the sort of thing that could help you get a real superstar, right? Rather than a draft pick, right? So it's like, okay, if teams are that enamored, like, maybe we should consider what's the best way to use a player like that in a trade as well.
Yeah, and you obviously you have him not on the length of a draft contract, but on a number that would be
that too
incredible number for a rookie, right? Which Alex knows better than I do, because we're doing like our Knicks like essentially trade value rankings. And Alex, like, I'm surprised you threw that name out there, because I know how highly you think of him, but that might be, to your point, like a testament to what you think of Devin Carter too.
Look, we just gotta, we gotta throw all hypotheticals at the wall.
Sure.
That's the point, right? That's why I was curious, but I probably wouldn't do that myself.
Interesting.
But, all right. You could throw stuff out there even if you don't want to do it.
Alex was just trying to trap me. He was just trying to trap me, test my loyalty. Yeah, I respect it.
And Prez, here's why you're wrong. We want to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. My mind is always on the NBA. And we talk about disrespectful comps with Prez. I am going to talk about some disrespectful odds towards your New York Knicks. They are only the 4th favorite to come out of the Eastern Conference next year. Understand them being behind the Celtics. Do not understand them being behind the Bucks and the freaking Sixers, who we just beat into the ground without our second best player. Come on, FanDuel. I love you, but do better. If you think that's disrespectful, head over to FanDuel and pour some hard-earned money into your New York Knicks. Plus 750. I'm not even going to say favorites. Underdogs to reach the to get out of the Eastern Conference Finals next year. So if you agree, head to FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right. All right. Next guy I wanted to jump to. I want to hit Isaiah Collier at some point because he's really interesting. But Kyle Filipowski, just because the idea, and I don't know if you think of him as more of a 4 or 5, and I think, if tell me if I'm wrong about this, that's maybe like one of the tricky things about evaluating him. But the idea of the Knicks coming away with a legitimate stretch 5 is incredibly tantalizing to me, because we've known it forever, of course, but like you saw in the playoffs, like obviously like a guy's on a completely different level, but what the Celtics did with KP, even the stress that the Pacers put on us with Miles Turner, and if Hartenstein is gone, obviously you literally do need another center in there, unless you bring back Precious and you're okay with Mitch and Precious as your rotation. But just to have that as a playoff curveball, because I think even like we've gone back and forth on this show, and I'm sure you and Schwinn have too on Pod Strickland. Like, all right, could the Knicks have beaten the Celtics if fully healthy? And that was always my one bit of hesitancy. Like, all right, like they were going to do the same thing that Indiana did and take away the Knicks' strength at the rim, and like the Knicks on the other end of the floor, like just didn't have that same tool to make Jalen Brunson's life that much easier, unless they wanted to commit to Anunoby at the 5, and maybe with a healthy Randall, like that could have been more possible. But obviously they don't have that guy on a long-term basis right now. And I guess, do you think does Filipowski bring that to the table while still doing enough traditional center stuff that it's actually palatable for Tibbs to play him there and play him there in the biggest moments?
It's a good question, and I don't really know the answer. Like you said, Tibbs did get a teeny bit more flexible. We could debate whether that was just by necessity, right, with injuries, or him doing ayahuasca in the forest. I don't know what caused it to happen, but he gave Precious some minutes. OG had some minutes against Joel Embiid, right, like as the 5. Late in the regular season, there were instances where OG and Julius were the 4 and 5, and OG was actually the center, not Julius, right, because he's better at rim protection and he's longer and he's got a little more vertical pop, moving backwards and stuff like that. So maybe, to your point though, Flip is he played power forward almost entirely as a freshman because Derek Lively, who just ended his pretty awesome playoff run for a rookie, right, was holding it down more than adequately. And this past year with Lively gone, Flip played center most of the time, and I thought he would struggle a lot more than he actually did. This is a guy who's 7 feet, who has a negative wingspan, 6'10" and change. So he's not the longest of rim protectors or deterrents. And he doesn't really jump that high either. He's like pretty below the rim on offense, even though he's a 7-footer. He's just really freaking strong and has great touch. So I was like, how's this going to test out, right? And he ended up getting a lot more blocks than his freshman year. The block rate jumped up quite a lot. And he's still got a ton of steals, which he did the year before. And, watching him on defense to evaluate him, the guy who kind of comes to mind to me in the NBA as a center is Alperen Şengün on defense, which is kind of a weird player to bring up because everybody, including me, was like, this dude is going to be garbage on defense. And he was very bad for his first couple of years. And then Ime Udoka comes in and he gets some more defenders on his team. And he actually was all right in some respects. But the reason Şengün was all right this year wasn't because he like got more athletic and was just blocking a zillion shots at the rim. It was that they were taking advantage of his strengths, which happened to be being pretty light on his feet and having incredible hands, right? This guy is always tops in the league in steals and deflections and gets a lot of blocks despite being a little smaller. But he has great quick hands and timing, and the stats reflect that. And Flip is kind of like that as well. Like when he's playing center for Duke and he's like, he never is doing like super deep drop or anything like that. But when he's doing shallow drop or playing at the level and they try to like sneak a pass to their roll man or something like that, or a lob, like he just has super quick hands and really quick instincts on defense, and it allows him to kind of outplay his physical gifts or lack thereof on defense. So he might, that's all a long way of saying that I don't know if that's going to be the same case as a rookie, right? Like Şengün took a couple of years to kind of get his footing, and he's probably has even better hands than Flip. So I don't know if like say Isaiah Hartenstein left, like we're like Flip is gonna be a downgrade on defense, like a very large downgrade from probably even our backup centers. Well, actually not Sims. Sims is not very great at defense. But Precious, when he's doing his thing, can be well. I guess that's just a question of which Precious shows up on a given night. But on offense, everything you said is true. Like he's a good shooter, and I think he's a better shooter than his numbers indicate. And he can do things with the ball. He can do your handoffs. He can drive. He can take multiple dribbles. He can attack mismatches. He's too fast and skilled for guys slower than him, and he's too strong for guys smaller than him. So it's, if that narrow, specific type of defense can hold up, then I think he could be a real center, and I think that would appeal to the Knicks. The fact that he could play backup for and be your quote unquote small ball guy, but be 7 feet. Like, I feel like that's a way to compromise with Tibbs, right? Like, look, we'll give you a small ball guy that we want you to play, but he's actually 7 feet tall, 235 pounds, right? Like, come on. We're not asking you to play like Josh Hart out here at the center, even though he might do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see what this next season brings. Every year that I think I have Tibbs figured out, he throws some new lineup out there that makes me go, hold on, what did he just do? Like, well, to your point, when he threw that lineup out there during the playoffs that had like effectively like OG as the center, I was like, what is happening right now? I never thought I'd see the day, but here we are. Tibbs is growing, so maybe he would be down. Maybe that would be as you said, a nice compromise. Sticking with that same college team, though, this is a guy I haven't brought up in a minute, or I feel like I haven't talked about a lot in terms of the draft so far during this cycle, because it seems like his stock has been weird. It seemed like initially he was getting mocked to the Knicks a lot in like the general early 20s range. And then like he all of a sudden was getting mocked like borderline top 10, like lotto almost for sure. And now he's sort of in all the mock drafts I'm seeing drifting back towards like the 20th pick again. And it's making me start to consider like, hey, maybe this guy is realistic. And that's Jared McCain out of Duke, who, I've seen people compare him to one Emmanuel Quickly. Jonathan Wasserman just did that in his most recent mock draft. And, he's just sort of one of those guys that reads like a Knicks player to me a bit when I look at the stats, when I look at what he did on the court, when I watch some of the tape, like he seems like he plays the style of ball that Tibbs likes out of his guards. He's, versatile. He seems to shoot pretty well. He can create off the dribble a bit. What's your thoughts on McCain? Do you think, I mean, I don't know, where do you think he's sitting right now as far as stock goes? Because it seems very bizarre. Like he got a green room invite, but as I'm looking through the green room invite list, it's literally 25 players that got invited.
They got everybody in there.
So yeah, they're really covering their bases. So I feel like that doesn't mean anything this year. So it's kind of just left me wondering, like, where are we at with this dude? Like, what do teams think his stock is, and why is he potentially fallen, or what? Like, what's kind of your thoughts on McCain right now?
I don't think his stock is falling. It fell and then it started going back up because at the end of the season he went on a freaking heater. He scored 30 a couple of times in their last 10 games, I think 3 times. And for most of the year he was taking a backseat to older players, to Flip, of course. And he started getting them up a little bit more later on. And I think it looks like just going from the last couple of mocks, the last 2 days, he's been in like the teens pretty consistently. I feel like the most common mock I've seen for him is to Orlando, which I think would be phenomenal because, to your point, I think teams are scared of small players right now, right? Dillingham probably dropping out of the top 10. Everybody saw what happened to Scoot, and the book is obviously not closed on Scoot. He's super young, but like, it's just a lot of things got to go right for a short dude. And, I've seen the Quickly comparisons, but I think they're kind of stupid because Quickly, for all his offensive gifts, and he had many, derived value on the court primarily from defense for the majority of his career so far. So, like, if you're comparing someone to Emmanuel Quickly, and they're an offense first 6'3", 6'3" wingspan guy who doesn't project to be a above average defender. It tells me that when you say Emmanuel Quickly, you really mean like the idea of Quickly, of people who like don't really watch Quickly or don't know ball or just think he was who people thought he was out of Kentucky. So like in that sense, it's a good comparison because like the kind of guy that I think a lot of people quickly think is like some spark plug offense guy who can run the point a little bit, who can play off ball, who can shoot, who's probably a little too skinny and undersized to really like hang on defense. Because that's kind of how I view McCain. It's really hard to be a plus defender unless you are some sort of psycho animal like TJ McConnell at that size. And McCain might be that guy, right? Like he's super competitive. His impact stats are great. He's a great rebounder. So even though he's 6'3" with short arms, like he's definitely not afraid to mix it up. He has no problem dribbling in the paint and just being physical. He's not like a bowling ball tank like Eric Bledsoe, but he's also not a twig, right? For 6'3". So like he's one of the guys who could definitely make me look stupid. I'm probably lower on him than most people, but he's just kind of a winning player, as corny as it sounds. And I do think he has a little bit more point guarding skills than he showed at Duke. So that would be another thing that could pop if he goes to like Orlando or something. That wouldn't surprise me. But it's just the bar for your offense is just really high if you're not going to be like a plus defender at the point guard, right? Like you look at guys like how good does Halliburton have to be? Does Jalen Brunson have to be? All these dudes, it's like they're like the best offensive players in the country, in the world, right? Like it's nuts.
All right, that's it for this edition of Locked On Knicks with Prez. But guess what? This is a 3-part episode, so we've got 2 more parts coming your way. Next part, I think, is going to be really interesting for a lot of you. It's a lot of guys we end up talking about that seem like they could be potential home runs for the Knicks. So guys that either have high upside compared to where they're projected, but have some flaws, obviously, that they need to work through, or guys that maybe could fall to the Knicks, but previously had higher draft stocks. We're talking guys like Isaiah Collier, Jacoby Walter, Deron Holmes we talk about, who's sort of a riser right now, but could still potentially make it to the Knicks and has some crazy stats that make him seem really attractive. Khalil Ware, who was a big-time prospect a couple years ago and now had to kind of refine himself and now is entering the draft. And Tyler Smith from the G League Ignite, who, when we talked to Prez, he's super high on him, but not super in love with where he played his basketball this past year and thinks that might be limiting him a little bit. So lots of great discussion, lots more to talk about next time on Locked On Knicks.